everyone. I'm Lena Banks, certified financial planning professional and small business coach based here in Austin, Texas. Welcome to this week's episode of Financial Therapy. I'm excited to get real people talking about how we can all be more secure and confident in our financial decision making. And this week we're talking about 3 questions to spot check your feelings of obligation around money. I know that sounds like a mouthful, but a few episodes back we talked about common biases and broke them down into 4 categories. And those 4 categories I happily termed the 4 horsemen of personal finance. And they are obligation, fear and denial, guilt, shame, and pride. And each one of those embodies kind of different parts of our emotional psyche. They're different motivators for why we might make financial decisions, and maybe not the best financial decisions. And so they're kind of like the bad angels, if you will, sitting on one shoulder. And today we're doing a kind of a deeper dive into obligation. And this is kind of a strategy that our mind uses a lot of times to tell us that we must get in there and do something with our finances that maybe is not the most considered option and might not actually be helping everyone we intend it to help, including ourselves. So obligation can lead to, or feelings of obligation around finances can lead to a martyr mentality where you feel like if you don't do it, no one else will do it. And it can also, of course, lead to some extreme financial stress. Because if you're constantly feeling obligated to spend or to make money in service of something that you also feel is an obligation, especially when it's someone or for something, for someone or something that you love or you really enjoy, that is really tough. But obligation is the condition of being morally or legally bound to do something. And so why would we feel obligated to do something that we are not, in fact, morally or legally bound to do? And in order to know if it fits that category, morally, legally, you actually have to explore yourself and what you are spending your money on, what you are feeling obligated to spend your money on. Understanding whether or not that spending fits that definition requires a little bit of inner work to discover why you might feel obligated. An obligation is a debt of gratitude for a service or a favor. So it's something that you pay something to and you're getting something in return. And I think that's really important because a lot of our financial obligations personally, you're not really quite sure what you are getting in return. And you really should be. You should have thought that through. You should be thinking through where the end game is of that obligation. Very rarely would anybody say, yes, please, to pouring their money down a hole where they aren't seeing some sort of benefit or result, right? And so that's an important point on the definition of obligation, is that you should be paying a debt in gratitude for something you're getting back, a service, a favor, an impact that is positive and beneficial to you, someone you love, humanity as a whole. Those are the obligations that you should plan your budget and your finances around. So let's talk about 3 questions to kind of spot check your feelings of obligation. When you're feeling obligated to spend money or to earn more money, let's talk about what you can ask yourself in order to kind of mitigate that feeling, or at least understand if it fits the definition of something that you're truly morally or legally bound to do, and that you're going to get something in return for. It's not a bad thing to expect something in return for your obligation, for your commitment to something. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the kind of ugly ways that obligation might show itself in your financial life. So sometimes you do things that you feel obligated to do because of a bias, a familiarity with being required to do said thing. And so doing it because you've always done it is a really bad way to spend money you don't have and or stay in a position financially earning what you earn and not thinking more outside of the box or looking for opportunities to change careers, go back to school. So familiarity with your surroundings and how your finances are working, but not kind of second guessing that and letting it become a bias in your life and an obligation to sticking to that kind of status quo, that can be troublesome. It can also show up in confirmation bias, which is much the same thing. Basically, if you see the results of something, then you think that those results are going to be the same going forward, and so therefore you might feel obligated to continue in that track, right? Or you look for things that confirm your current beliefs or your current version of what obligation looks like in your life. Your parents always paid for their kids to go to college, so that's what you feel like you should do. Your nephew had a great experience when his parents did that for him, so now you feel obligated to do that for your kids. That sort of thing is, the familiarity bias, the confirmation bias of just kind of seeing what you want to see. And then the last one is herd instinct, which is, again, kind of in that same vein of you do what everyone else is doing, you feel obligated to do what everyone else is doing, and it's irrespective of what your budget says or tells you. And so all of those things can kind of make themselves make you feel obligated to do things that you might not typically do if you took a tick and just kind of followed where your values and where your intuition is taking you as far as when you spot check these feelings. So let's get into it. So 3 questions to spot check your feelings of obligation. The first one is this in my budget? Budgets are boundaries. If you haven't listened to that episode, budgets are boundaries, 4 hard truths for why you don't have one. I really encourage you to go back and listen to that episode. No one should be pressuring you to do something or obligate you to do something you can't or haven't planned to do and put in your budget. Unless it's an emergency. Obligations are commitments you build your budget around. They're not something that just pop up. So if it's not in your budget, it is not only not an obligation, it's not your priority. You haven't made it your priority. You haven't had the conversation where someone convinces you it's your priority, or where you convince yourself, or where your financial partner convinces you. So if it's not in your budget, it is not only not an obligation, it is not your actual priority. And if you've somehow forgotten to include it, that's a whole other conversation. So is this in my budget? That's the first question to ask. The second question is, what am I giving up? So most of us would consider helping out a family member or a friend as the right thing to do. That's something that you're obligated to do. And I would just add that it's the right thing to do, and it's an obligation for a reasonable and or limited amount of time, a limited amount of money, a short time. Time and money are finite resources. And I'm going to repeat that. Time and money are finite resources. So what are you giving up for that obligation? And it doesn't matter if it's a long-term obligation or if it is an emergency. If you feel obligated to spend that money on something, if you feel obligated to make money a certain way, what are you giving up in order to make that happen? And if you're not just investigating that question and asking yourself, is it worth what you are giving up to meet that obligation? Trust yourself to answer correctly, right? If I said, I'm giving up an extra half hour in the morning to take my kid to this school that we chose as a family, and that is going to be best for him or her, and then you have that conversation with your family and you invest in that decision and you invest in what you're giving up. It's okay to give up that half hour. It's okay to move yourself in a new direction, your child in a new direction, because you understand as a family, as a team, what the value of that is. That's an example with time. So money is the same thing. It's a finite resource. I guarantee you, if you are paying for childcare, more for childcare or something like that, and you guys have made that decision together, you understand that you are giving up something in exchange for spending it somewhere else. And so budgets allow you to set those priorities for yourselves, as a family, and as a financial unit. If you're single, all the better, because you can have the conversations with yourself very efficiently. But you still need to have the conversations. I think sometimes when we are single and we're on our own, we can get into the space of just kind of going through the motions and not stopping to ask ourselves, what are my priorities? Okay, is this in my budget? Should I change my budget based on something that has occurred in my life? Shifting gears when life events happen is important, and your priorities are going to shift. So get familiar with what you're going to be giving up if you want to stand firm in the commitment you're going to make or the obligation that you have. I would say write them down. I think it's important to write down the financial sacrifices that you're making in order to meet your obligations. It will help you to stand firm in the commitment, or maybe it'll help you recognize it's actually not an obligation that you want to take on. So the second thing to ask yourself, the second question to spot check your feelings of obligation is, what am I giving up for this commitment? And then the third question you should ask yourself to spot check your feelings of obligation is, how does meeting this obligation lead to more freedom, or really does it lead to more dependence? So does meeting this obligation enable more freedom in my life, in someone else's life, or does it generate or create or lead to, down the road, if we're honest with ourselves, more dependence? So frankly, it's really easy to be an enabler when it comes to people we love, including ourselves, our own family, our spouse. We can talk ourselves into just about anything. And if what you're doing isn't going to directly or indirectly result in more freedom for you or who you're financially responsible for, you really just might want to rethink it. Or at least ensure that your help comes with some conditions, because the conditions can help everybody succeed. We did an episode about how to communicate your boundaries, your budget boundaries. And one of the things I mentioned was that you should really be prepared for pushback, because people are not going to necessarily always like the boundaries that you set. And sometimes they might cross the boundary that you have set. And so it's important for you to be prepared for that, to set expectations, to at least think about what the consequences might be for someone not meeting your conditions. So having some consistent communication, some clear expectations does give everyone involved the freedom of clarity. And so when I say, how does meeting this obligation lead to more freedom, or does it lead to more freedom versus how does it lead potentially to more dependence? A good example is kids and the increasing number of adult children who rely on their parents for regular income. So according to surveys.com, about half of parents send their adult children money each month. So they're paying for child's living expenses, anything from rent or mortgage payments, all the way to having them on their phone bill. Average age is 27 that a child actually rolls off of their parents' phone bill. And we all know that Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, I think lasts until 26 with your kids on your parents' plan. So there's this ingrained kind of understanding that as parents, we're going to take care of our kids and kind of subsidize their life for an extended period of time into young adulthood. And I think that's perfectly, that makes perfect sense. These are obligations that we kind of feel, again, that are just kind of baked into the cake. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there is an importance to making sure that something like that is in your budget. Is this in my budget? And can I actually credibly help my child with anywhere up to, I think the average was around $1,000 a month for those who did get assistance from their parents? Can I actually help them? Or am I struggling myself? Do I need to figure out how to convey to this person that I cannot meet that obligation? I would love to meet that obligation, but it's not in my budget. Can I have an honest discussion about what I'm giving up? If I do meet that obligation, maybe I can stretch to make it work. What am I giving up? And can I actually have a conversation about, I can't do 1,000. I can do 800. And I'm making a sacrifice over here. And this is what that sacrifice looks like, so that my child can then understand that that time and money are a finite resource. And that gives them the tools to then make more critical decisions about what they're spending, so that they're not taking your $800 and going, cool, I am going to live it up over here. Having that conversation allows everybody to understand what the sacrifices need to be, and what the sacrifices are. And I'm not saying that you should be having those types of conversations with like a 5-year-old, mommy is really sacrificing for you. No, but you should definitely be having those conversations with yourself. And I do believe that you should be having them with your adult children as well. And so going on with our example, you would want to ask how meeting that obligation to them would lead to more freedom for them, for you, not more dependence, because there is a finite amount of those dollars. But even if there weren't, the idea is, what do you want to create? Are you creating freedom, or are you creating dependence? Be honest about what it actually is that you're doing. I would say definitely put some time constraints on your support or that obligation that you are committing to. Things like adding conditions, like they maintain a job, they go to school full time. All of this, again, is part of this example of what obligation to an adult child perhaps looks like. You need to ask yourself these questions to spot check your feelings of obligation and ensure that the outcome of your help and that obligation that you do have or that you do take on is a benefit to everyone. It's the same thing with any sort of obligation that you're taking on, any sort of debt. If you were looking to buy a house, is this in my budget? what would I be giving up to have this home? Trust me, there are a ton of people who are house poor and happily so. And then there are people who regret deeply their decision. It matters because everything is personal, to ask yourself what you're giving up and really be okay with that when you take on a new obligation. And then finally, if you want to ask yourself how meeting that obligation would lead to more freedom versus more dependence, that would apply to a home or a house, just by saying, what is freedom to me? Is it freedom to me to not have to pay a lease or to have like a landlord who's in charge of things and I've got to go through him to get any sort of maintenance done or any sort of do any sort of improvements on my living space? Or is freedom to you, oh my gosh, I could move anytime. I don't have to worry about having a mortgage that I'm tied to. I could explore different neighborhoods. What does freedom look like for you versus dependence? And just question what feelings you have about that financial obligation. And I promise you, going through these motions will help you formulate a budget, formulate some financial goals, will help you understand your financial values and what you actually do want to work for or want to save and be more disciplined about your finances for in the long term. So, thanks so much for listening, everyone. I really appreciate you joining me for financial therapy this week. This was 3 questions to spot check your feelings of obligation. First, asking, is this in my budget? Second, what am I giving up? And finally, how does meeting my obligation lead to more freedom, or how does it lead to potentially more dependence? I am so excited about the show. If you are enjoying it, please don't forget to like us, give us a review, and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I do love hearing from you guys, so please call or text to submit your feedback. The number to do so is just below in the show notes. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next week.